Now that the show page is working, let's bring the home page to life. This time, instead of querying for one question object, we want to query for all of them. Head over to Question Controller and scroll up to Homepage. Okay, to fetch data, we need to auto-wire the Entity Manager with Entity Manager Interface Entity Manager. Now add repository equals Entity Manager arrow get repository question : class, and finally questions equals repository arrow find all. Let's DD questions to see what these look like. Okay, refresh the homepage. There we go! 12 question objects for the 12 rows in my table. Now we're dangerous because we can pass these into our template. Add a second argument to render, an array, to pass a questions variable set to our array of question objects. Pop open the template, templates question homepage.html.twig. Let's see. The homepage currently has 2 hard-coded questions. I want to loop right inside the row. Curly brace % for question in questions. Trace the markup down to see where this ends. And add end for. Delete the second hard-coded question completely. Perfect. Now it's just like the show page because we have a question variable. The first thing to update is the question name, question.name, and the slug also needs to be dynamic, question.slug. Below, for the question text, use question.question pipe parse markdown. We might also want to only show some of the question on the page. We could do that by adding a new method like getQuestionPreview to the entity and using it here. We'll see this idea of custom entity methods later. At the bottom, there's one more link. Question.slug. Done! Doctrine makes it easy to query for data, and Twig makes it easy to render. Go team! At the browser, refresh, and cool! Each question has a random asked at date. You can see it by clicking into each one. What we probably want to do is put the newest questions on top. In other words, we want to do the same query, but with order by asked at descending. If you click the database icon on the Web Debug toolbar, you can see that the query doesn't have an order by yet. When you're working with the built-in methods on the repository class, you're a bit limited. There are many custom things that these methods simply can't do. For example, findAll doesn't have any arguments. There's no way to customize the order or anything else. Soon, we'll learn how to write custom queries so we can do whatever we want. But in this case, there is another method that can help, findBy. Pass this an empty array, we don't need any where statements, and then another array with asked at equal arrow descending. Let's try it. Refresh and click the first. 10 days ago, click the second. 1 month ago, I think we got it. If we jump into the profiler, yes, it has order by asked at descending. We've now pushed the built-in repository methods about as far as they can go. Question time. When we call getRepository, what does that actually return? It's an object, of course, but what type of object? The answer is entity repository. In PhpStorm, I'll press Shift and type entityrepository.php. I want to see what this looks like. Make sure to include all non-project items. Here it is. Entity repository lives deep down inside of Doctrine, and it is where the methods we've been using live, like find, findAll, findBy, findOneBy, and some more. But check this out. In the controller, DD repository. When we refresh, surprise, I lied! Sort of. Instead of being an instance of entity repository, like I promised, this is an instance of app/repository/question repository. Hey, that's a class that lives in our project. Open it up. Source repository question repository.php. When we originally ran make entity to generate question, it actually generated two classes, question and question repository. This class extends another called service entity repository. And if you hold Command or Control and click into it, that class extends entity repository, the class we were just looking at. When we ask for the repository for the question entity, Doctrine actually returns a question repository object. But since that ultimately extends entity repository, we have access to all the helper methods like findAll and findBy. But how does Doctrine know to give us an instance of this class? How does it connect the question entity to the question repository class? Is it relying on a naming convention? Nope. The answer lives at the top of the question class. We have @orm/entity with repository class equals question repository : class. This was generated for us by make entity. Here's the big picture. When we call getRepository and pass it question : class, Doctrine will give us an instance of question repository. And because that extends entity repository, we get access to the shortcut methods. The reason this is cool is that anytime we need to write a custom query for the question entity, we can add a new method inside of question repository. The class already has an example. Uncomment the findByExample field method. If I have a findByExample field method in the repository, it means that we can call this from the controller. In a few minutes, we're going to write a custom query that finds all questions where asked_at is not null. In question repository, let's create a method to hold this. How about findAllAsked ordered by newest? And this won't need any arguments. In the controller, remove the DD and say questions equals repository findAllAsked order by newest. Of course, that won't work yet because the logic is all wrong, but it will call the new method. Next, let's learn about DQL and the query builder. Then, we'll create a custom query that will return the exact results we want.